o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And thank you all for coming. And Greg Brinkle is going to lead us into prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Lord, for another beautiful day. Thank you for allowing us all to gather together to do the county's business. We ask that you guide us and help us to leave here more informed than we are when we came. You hear me pray? Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and next we'll do the roll call, please. Oh,
I don't have my paper, sorry.
Oh.
McWhirter?
Here.
Fleming? Not here?
Yeah, he said he may not be here.
I didn't think so. Yeah, just down.
And I spoke to Frank Hicks. He's on his way here. He forgot about the call.
Scott?
Here.
Kitts?
Here.
Cuddell?
Here.
Brinkle?
Here.
And Hicks, okay.
All right, thank you very much. And then, I don't know if this is an official meeting of the commissioners or no. Is this just the council? Okay. All right. Next we have new business. We have new legislation discussion is what's on our agenda. Yep.
Take it off.
Be Sydney from Volt Strategies.
Yes, so Sydney Shiresny with Volt Strategies represent you guys at the State House. Thanks for allowing me to present tonight. The legislative session wrapped up on April 25th at almost midnight of this year. And as you know, it was a budget session. And while there's always a lot on the docket for local units of government, this year, as I was just saying, was an unprecedented year for local government issues, with property taxes being the highlight of that. And so how I wanted to go about this presentation was I'll talk about where we started during session, where we ended up. I'll go into Senate Enrolled Act 1. I'll talk a little bit about the contents of that. I know that you guys are having your fiscal advisors look at that. That's what I would advise as well. On kind of the association side, on the statewide side, we're doing the same still. There's a lot to it, and there's just some things to shake out. So we're just still trying to figure out the long-term impacts, and I'll go through what my thoughts are with how this will play into future sessions, because I don't think the conversation is over. If you actually heard Governor Braun talk, I forget where he was this morning, but he had said that Senate Enrolled Act 1 was just step one. And so I think we can anticipate more larger discussions over the next couple years before the 2028 cycle. So after that, I'll go into some other pieces of legislation that are pretty pertinent to you guys. I'll talk about some of the issues that did not make it across the finish line that we'll probably want to pay attention to. And then I'll talk about what the interim typically looks like, what I like it to look like for clients. And then we'll talk about what it looks like going into the fall months and eventually next session. And I'll encourage you guys to start thinking about some of the tasks or initiatives we might want to tackle as an individual county next year. So to start off, 1,229 bills were authored at the beginning of the legislative session, and by the end of it, by April 25th, 243 bills passed. That's about 20%. And I say that with a really big asterisk next to it, because while 243 bills passed, I would add probably a couple hundred bills to that number, just because a lot of them are consolidated into one. Senate Enrolled Act 1 is a conglomerate of bills, if you will, of tax bills that were actually authored. And so that's pretty typical of the pass-fail rate, if you will. Next year is not a budget year, so we'll see not as many bills authored, but it'll be pretty high. There's more limits in the non-budget years because you cannot author legislation with a fiscal of over 55,000. So I'll start off with Senate Enrolled Act 1 unless anybody has some high-level questions they want to start off with. So we'll go into the meat and potatoes of it. All right, so Senate Enrolled Act 1 does a lot, and as you know. And so property tax relief was the goal of Senate Enrolled Act 1. The governor ran on it. The General Assembly started off with a bill that was about a $1.6 billion hit to local governments without any sort of reauthorization. And then it kind of turned into this piecemeal bill, if you will, on credits and reauthorization through lit and things of that nature. So homestead is the trend that we're seeing for property tax relief by way of Senate Enrolled Act 1. So this homestead credit increased from 7.5%, which is about a $200 credit to Hoosiers, to 10% of AB, which is that $300 credit that homestead owners will see. Senior and disabled deductions were replaced with $150 credit for 65 and over, $125 credit for disabled homeowners. Standard homestead deduction will phase out by 2031, and supplemental homestead deductions will gradually increase to 2/3 of the AB by 2031. Agricultural land was capped, the rate cap for base value temporarily increased to 9% for just 25 and 26. And then inventory land is exempt from that in 25, but not in 26. And then utility property on ag land is included from solar land base rate. One of the biggest highlights I want to highlight in Senate Enrolled Act 1 is the business personal property tax. So originally, there was an exemption or de minimis exception of $1 million in pay year 26, $2 million in pay year 27. At the very last hour, we were able to knock that back with taking the $1 million back to $80,000. For 25 or for 26 pay 27, and then right now the de minimis exception for pay year 27 is still $2 million. I will note that I think this is probably going to be one of the, I can't confidently say there will be tweaks, but I think this will be a pretty big topic of discussion. I think there were several members of the General Assembly that didn't quite understand how this may impact their communities at home. And ones with large industry and not a lot of other tax base are going to see pretty significant hits. And so I think that it was one of those things where, you know, with the governor having this as his priority issue and Senate Enrolled Act 1 being the #1 priority bill in the Senate, it needed to pass. And there's some of these levers that are not pulled until 2028, 2027. So we have time to work on them, business personal property tax being one of them. Some local government impacts that we'll see. So property tax levies are capped at prior year levels unless AB increases. And if so, tax rates must decrease proportionately. The maximum levy growth quotient, or the MLGQ, is capped at 4% in 26 and 2.9% in 2028. So another date that you will notice in Senate Enrolled Act 1 is the date 2028. A lot of these levers are pulled starting in 2028, and I think that's a significant number in a sense where it kind of signals they know that they pulled a lot of levers and a lot of changes are going to happen, but there is time to really flesh that out and figure out what some of those fiscal impacts are. I mean, a lot of you, like you told me earlier, are still working through those fiscal impacts of what Senate Enrolled Act 1 will do, and so 26 and 27, obviously 26 is a short session, no large fiscal changes, but 27 is going to be a budget year. And so I would anticipate that a lot of these issues that have that 2028 marker will be discussed and potentially tweaked over the next couple years, especially in 2027 when we have another opportunity to reopen the budget.
One comment on that, when the General Assembly finishes in 27, there's not a lot of time between when they finish. Well, we'll have to take action in 27 or 28.
Absolutely.
So there's not a big window there.
No, there's not. There's a couple months of a window, and so not much at all, especially by the time you need to do your budgets at the end of that
You
year.
know, the time we started at least,
Right.
there'll be a short window. The time we have to complete, there's a few months, but still, it's not a big.
No, yes, exactly. I mean, you don't have a quick turnaround at all. And so it'll be really important to make sure that we're at the table and making sure that whatever tweaks are needed to put Grant County in a more favorable position, because in 2028, from my recollection of your fiscal impact of Senate Enrolled Act 1, it was pretty significant. At one point, I think it was 13.8% of a hit.
$3 million are telling us right now, which is
And I can pull it up.
14.8%. Yeah, 14.8.
Yeah, okay, right. So and there's those triggers in there that you see. So local income tax changes, max lit rate will increase to 2.9% starting in 28. So there's another one of those. So local income tax, as you know, is the replacement for that property tax relief, if you will. The intention of the General Assembly moving to the local income tax rate is sort of a eat what you kill scenario. So cities and towns up to a certain population will be able to authorize their own lit rate, and then counties will have their own as well. And so it stays where it's collected. And so there's not a large redistribution at the county level anymore. And that was something that Chairman Thompson was really passionate about. That was a House-driven initiative. And so that is what went into Senate Enrolled Act. That was actually in a separate bill earlier, and that went into Senate Enrolled Act 1 in the second half of session.
And actually, that's not necessarily a bad part of this. To me,
Correct.
of all the segments
I
of
would
this,
agree.
I like that from the standpoint of, right now, in our county, we have a tax council involved. City of Marion's a big chunk of that. City of Gas City is a big chunk of that. And we're the third, I guess we're second, Marion, us, then Gas City. We don't have to worry about what Gas City and Marion do on their income tax. It's us. So the people in the county that elect us, we're going to be getting the impact of that. City of Marion people will have their own impact, so to speak. So I kind of like that separation, kind of like it used to be before the tax reform in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Your unit's tax rate didn't affect somebody else's status. So.
And I think the concept, and we were just talking about this, the concept and the simplicity of that, I agree, right? It's a more simple concept. I think you get into the weeds a little bit and it gets a little complicated if you don't have a large tax base to make up that property tax shift from those homesteads. And, that's where some of the questions come in and say, well, if this is the case, then what, right? And
Well, it kind of leaves the small towns out in the wind, so to speak.
right, and
Libraries.
and schools. And so the components of the new lit cap: 1.2% for county general, 0.4% for fire and EMS, 0.2 for civil taxing units, and a 1.2 for smaller municipalities of 3,500 or those choosing their own lit. Municipalities with 3,500 or more residents may levy their own lit by 2028. There's some food and beverage and innkeepers tax language that was in there for a certain number of communities. Schools obviously had a pretty big, significant hit. They're about a $730 million loss over the course of 3 years. They're not eligible for new lit revenues under Senate Enrolled Act 1. Referendums become kind of a key funding replacement option for them. There were some administrative changes and some new caps on public safety, fire protection territories, and conservancy districts. And so that is a high level overview of Senate Enrolled Act 1. It is a one size fits all solution in a sense where it's for everyone or it applies to everyone, but how that impacts you is very unique to your makeup of your county. Again, are you heavy industry? Do you have a aging population? Do you high ag? And so all of those factors really matter. And so if you look at the fiscal impact of Senate Enrolled Act 1 and the way it is right now, it's across the board. Some counties are faring well in it, quite frankly, and some are not. And that 2028, again, is really where you see all of those changes happen, and those are all into effect. And I think that's an important year to pay attention to and something we'll want to have a conversation about. going forward. So I'm not a municipal attorney or a financial advisor, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. And I sent this document about a month ago. I can resend it too if anybody wants that at the top of their inbox.
Yeah, I know we're not a school corporation, we're county government, but you mentioned the impact on schools. I asked Angie to give me the copy, because I saw it online, and she printed it off for me. The DLGF has the circuit record report that shows impact. If you look at just the school corporations, that will no longer have property tax relief after 28 unless we do something different. Marion schools, their losses this year with the current structure in place is almost 2.7 million. It'll be more, down the road. Mississippi Law School is almost 300,000. Those are the two big ones in our county. The rest of them are small. But that's an example of dollars those schools won't get because of that change unless something happens to change that. So that's going to be a tough one. They can't do a lift like we can.
It's referendum, right?
That's the only item they have is referendum at that point. So, and good luck with that, right?
Right.
In this county. So we'll see.
So any other questions? And I'll move on to road funding. 1461, House Enrolled Act 1461 was the omnibus road funding bill. What ended up happening with that, it was not as contentious as we thought it was, although the wheel tax was a big discussion throughout session. Basically, the biggest part of that bill, community crossings, remained intact. It was kind of up in the air for a while. Awards are capped at $100 million per year, and any surplus will be distributed based on total lane mileage starting in 2028. Also starting in 2028, that surplus amount for your overall distribution outside of the $100 million for CCMG will be tied to the wheel tax. So you will need a wheel tax. And do you guys have a wife? Most do. And so that'll be tied to your overall distribution amount starting in 2028. Lane miles is obviously a concern. Again, a one-size-fits-all piece of legislation, but the way it impacts communities is different, right? And so I don't know if your fiscal team has looked at what that distribution might be for you starting in 2028, but I would recommend maybe that's part of your discussions as you move throughout the summer. There's not much else in that bill, but there's tolling authorization. I think we might see that coming up in other legislative sessions. Another bill I wanted to bring up, and I'll kind of round out my presentation after that, is Senate Enrolled Act 425. This is one of those bills that started off looking one way and ended up looking totally different towards the end. And I believe I sounded the alarm on this bill towards the end of session a little bit. So it started off as an energy bill that was strictly focused on converting coal plants to natural gas facilities. That was the contents of the bill. Solar, any kind of renewable was exempt from that language. So the bill went through the Senate. We were keeping an eye on it just for any changes. It didn't impact this area. But when it got to the Senate or the House Utilities Committee, and I say utilities, it's important that you know that it went through the Utilities Committee and an amendment was offered that basically rewrote all zoning laws in Title 36. And Title 36 usually goes through the local government committee, and that's something we had a pretty significant concern over because no local government folks got to review that language. And so it made broad changes to all local planning and zoning laws. So not just your renewable energy, this is your housing, this is anything related to zoning. It amended that and had some preemption language in there. And so we were able to get language added to that bill towards the end of session that protects all current comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. So that leads me to say, and again, this is not legal advice, but I would recommend that if you are not currently comfortable with your zoning ordinances, that you consider updating them because once a project gets submitted, you cannot change your ordinance cannot change, and if you do, it won't apply to that project. So again, if you want it to be more restrictive, less restrictive, that's something to consider, because that language is in there, but we were able to protect current local ruling on that.
Does that take effect July 1?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's not much time to do that.
Well, but if you don't have a project submitted, you do have some time. It's really when a project gets submitted that you're going to be under the gun. That's officially, and there's a moratorium shot clock on there of 1 year, so you can't do a moratorium for more than 1 year. So if there's rumblings of a project getting submitted, or you hear someone poking around, I think it would be a good, and you're not comfortable with your current ordinances, that's something to consider internally with your folks. So outside of that, we had the budget. So as you all know, we received word towards the end of session that the state was going to have a $2.4 billion shortfall, and I have to give a little jab here that some of my other friends in the municipal finance world make, because we were told all session, local governments have $56 million worth of debt. You guys need to rein in your budgets. And then we see that the state has a $2.4 billion shortfall. And it's kind of a pot kettle situation a little bit here. And so they had to scrap the budget pretty much. And there were some significant cuts in various areas. It was I think the hardest pill to swallow for most local governments across the state is the public health cut. So that was funded at about $125 million from the previous budget, and it went down to, I believe, $100 million for the proposed 26 and 27 budget. And at the end of the day, it went down to $40 million a year. So that was an over 60%, about a 60% cut. Community mental health, that funding actually stayed the same at $50 million. And then your level 6 per diem funding, or your county jail maintenance contingency fund, is funded at $45 million in 26 and $41 million in 27.
What is it currently? Did that go down, or?
It didn't go down. I believe $45 million was
So it stayed the same?
before, right? But it does go down in 27. And I need to fact check that too. But if it might have been a little over 45 million, but I don't think by much, but I can get you.
That was one of the concerns this past year, whether or not they had the funds to pay counties what they owed.
Correct. And from my understanding, they shored that up. Everybody was getting the money that they were owed. There was a deal worked out before we found out there was a $2.4 billion shortfall, about raising that to make sure a shortfall doesn't happen again as far as the level 6 per diem funding. So I think this was that compromise in light of all of the negotiations that had to be made. But from my understanding, everybody was made whole by that. And were you owed money? I believe I asked the
I'm not sure
county.
what the number was. We had some money due.
Yeah, I believe you emailed it to me because I had sent it off to.
Concern would be
Barnes.
going forward though, if they're going to reduce it or if they're going to keep it
Right.
status quo. At least status quo, I guess, is better than nothing. But
Right.
so that, with inflation, it doesn't help in a sense.
Correct. Well, and there's some talk about potentially incentivizing DOC to make sure that funds are paid on time, I think. And so that was something I believe Greg Sturwald had worked on too. So other bills of note, 1641 was an omnibus local government bill. Something that I think it's good for I'm talking about good news now. So something that's good for the county is we were able to amend the open door law a little bit, and it allows an executive session to be held to communicate with an attorney, subject to attorney-client privilege. Now, again, I'm not an attorney, but the way this plays out is if you're in a meeting with me, for example, and Connor is there, Connor's still your attorney, Connor's there, and I'm not protected, that conversation with me is not protected, but when all three of you or all of you are having a conversation, your attorney's there, those conversations are protected. It's just cleaning up some language a little bit and clarifying, if you will. So while a lot passed, it was a really difficult year. There was a lot of legislation that didn't pass, that we also didn't want to pass. 1628 was a bill. If you guys remember, I mean, you might not if you didn't have representation, but in 2021, House Bill 1381 was a wind and solar siting bill, total preemption and local control. I will never forget that bill number because of that year. It was a really tough year, and for local governments. And so 1628 was the 2025 version of that bill. We were able to defeat it in committee, in the authors committee too, and he was not happy. Hence why you saw maybe what you saw in Senate Enrolled Act 425. But home rule continues to be a topic of conversation and something that we butt heads on every year and discuss every year, and so that's something I'm always going to recommend keeping an eye out for is that home rule legislation. House Bill 1454 is a bill about EMS. This issue will come back up. This bill was going to require all counties to deploy their EMS programs. It would take all of it in-house. Now, a lot of counties do deploy their own EMS programs as it is. As we know, it's subsidized most of the time. And the problem with this bill, while I think the bill was had good intent, but there was no fiscal framework. If the county's really going to take that on and there's no funding mechanism, and you're saying it's required for them to provide this essential service, and in light of Senate Enrolled Act 1 passing as well, then what is this going to do to county budgets? And so our request is a couple things. If you are going to have this discussion, have the fiscal framework discussion at the same time. I had recommended, if we're taking the responsibility away from townships, let's take their levy or send us the levy for it, or allow us to pass a special tax or something, right? So we can capture that money. So this is not going to go away. Chairman Thompson is actually really passionate about EMS and fire issues. Another topic we had requested was looked at was the idea of if it's appropriate to decouple fire and EMS. I don't know how you successfully do that across the state, and so that's a conversation I imagine will not go away in the near future. The last one I'll go over. It would have been a good piece of legislation. We almost got it through. We do have commitments to revisit it next year, but House Bill 1523 would have allowed counties to bank outside their county territories. Right now, only cities and towns can do that, and counties, for whatever reason, are more limited. There's some bidding language where you could potentially go out, but again, in light of Senate Enrolled Act 1, our argument was, well, if you're gonna kind of tie our hands in some ways with our budgets and cap our growth, if you will, or slow our growth, then at least allow us to invest the public dollar and get the highest rate of return. And again, we almost got it there. It was really, really watered down at the end of session to where I'm not sure it would have been much of a benefit anyways. And so that's something that I think the statewide associations will revisit next year and hopefully support. So with that said, there's a lot of ins and outs for what happened this session, but I can kind of go into what the summer looks like and the fall months look like, unless anybody has any questions.
I think the concerns that I have to do with further changes to property tax, because at some point, I mean, how much can we do on a local lit without taxpayer revolt, especially right now? I think as it's still listed, we have to approve the lit each year.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, that's another one that doesn't happen until later, but is important especially because of bonding issues. So yes, all your lit has to be reauthorized every year starting in 2031.
Yeah, 31, I was thinking.
Okay, so it's that far out.
Yeah,
Yes,
31.
yes.
We thought it was 28, but it's 30.
No,
Okay.
it's 30, yes.
See,
it's
I was thinking it
31.
was 28, okay.
And I apologize, that was another one that was pretty big in there. The public finance groups are really raising alarms about that across the state. I imagine that will change. Yes, because that creates a bonding issue. I did have a discussion with a fiscal leader in the Senate just yesterday about this, and he believes that is not true. One of my counties is being told they will lose their AAA bond rating and over it, and he thinks that is unequivocally not true, but.
Yeah, it's interesting. Local government, this goes back to my years of being involved with this stuff. The big positive about having your local government funded on property taxes was because that was a very consistent source of revenue. It was considered a very consistent piece. Income taxes, not so consistent.
Right.
So now, as we shift to more income tax, I would think the bond sellers and the buyers of bonds would be more concerned about the fact that it's not as stable as the property tax piece like it used to be.
Right.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. That is a concern. Another one of those topics that I do believe will be on the docket for discussion in the next couple of years.
And I think a part of that stability was actually the business personal property. That was also a part of that as well.
It's part of the base.
Yeah.
The whole concept of property tax, though, was a very consistent stream of revenue. Because whatever levy you needed to do to raise the dollars you had to do, you would do that, within the fund restrictions and the cap restrictions and so forth. But it was a consistent source.
Right.
Because it wasn't subject to, quote, inflation like income is.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so summer months. Summer study committees. I don't call them that anymore. I call them interim committees because they don't take place into the fall, but those will be coming up quickly. I imagine we'll get summer study committee topics sometime in July. Typically, the General Assembly has what's called Technical Corrections Day. That's where they come in and clean up any code site mishaps, spelling errors, things like that. They canceled it this year. So I do not believe they will be having it, but we will see committee assignments be released within the next couple months. And so committees will start, the productive ones will really start meeting in August. We'll see some September, October, November, we'll see them really pick up, and then they'll create reports. A lot of them are required to create a report, and that really educates the following session on what we'll see for legislation in the following year. Now, that is obviously not an exhaustive list. Not every topic is talked about during the summer. So here's how I operate, how I advise operating, because I do represent you guys. So there was a topic of us working on a potential judicial issue, and that is a conversation I said that we, if you still wanted to explore, we could talk about that in the summer. I have some thoughts on that, but what I like to do is create a game plan or a strategy on how we're going to create an advocacy plan. A lot of people kind of start later in the year, have legislation authored in October and November, and then you move into session in January. I do like to start quite a bit earlier. We'll have a working session come in with you guys and have a working session to talk about, what's working in the county, what's not, and what are some tweaks we can make. A good example this year, and this is small, but it was impactful to that client, all county inmates can bring a lawsuit against a county sheriff, and that lawsuit will be paid for by the county. Well, we were able to change the statute so that inmates have to exhaust all administrative resources before bringing that lawsuit to the county. A small change, but it was meaningful to the county that we did it for. So I say all that to say is, I don't know, you guys are the subject matter experts of Grant County. So if there's something that's not working, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it in July. Let's figure out, and I'll be, I can kind of guide you on feasibility and where we might want to start and end up and things of that nature, and finding champions for the legislation. But I always like to start with maybe one or two, maybe bigger issues that are really important to you, and then a couple issues that are small tweaks that we can get through. And again, it's a short year. Instead of 16 weeks, we'll have anywhere from 9 to 12. But you can still do good work in this short session, and I encourage that forward movement and that momentum Because if it is a larger task that we want to accomplish, we can spend some of the shorter sessions really chipping away at the issue, instead of kicking the can down the road for a number of years. So I like to approach it that way, and encourage you guys to be open with me and innovative with me on that. I love a good strategy, and so I love hearing from you on what could be better in the county. And so what that would look like is July will come up with somewhat of a legislative agenda, if you will. We'll talk about what needs to be legislation versus if we can work administratively, or if we need to talk to a state agency, what path we need to go forward. And then with the pieces of, with the issues that we will want to author or have, language on, do we want it to be an actual bill, or do we want to find a home during session? So those are some strategies I'll work on internally with you guys. And then for the language that we do want to be actual pieces of legislation, we'll find champions for those to author those, and hopefully your local reps or senators will want to take that on, and we'll do tours and we'll educate them, and we'll meet with them for coffee or lunch, and and then we'll move right into the legislative session. And with that said, I got a call from Senator Zay Friday, and we talked yesterday. He would like to come in or meet to discuss just your thoughts and things that are going on in the community. And I'm happy to, he asked me to coordinate that. So I just figured I'd mention that now, and we'll want to do it with all of your representatives. But yeah, he reached out to me, which is good. So it's kind of my presentation. Again, happy to answer any questions.
So do you see really at the state level that they're trying to force more control over the local government? I mean, you talked about this 425 Senate Enrolled Act, because I remember getting some type of a survey or something and an email. And so I went online and it said, wouldn't it be easier in the state of Indiana if the zoning rules were all the same across the state of Indiana? So no matter which county you went to, they're all the same. And I just thought to myself, no, I don't think a one-size-fits-all is really a good thing. But it seems like this Senate Enrolled Act 425 was moving that direction.
Yes.
To really control that and set that in place. And then you've also got, basically you're going to wipe out our property tax, which is that stable income that we would have for our county government. And that's kind of getting pulled away, and we've got to go to lit. So now you're going to count on only your residents for that income, which is I think it's a significant savings for business. And I think it ends up with the personal people paying more, is my own opinion.
So to answer your question of, is the state really moving in the direction of more control?
Yeah.
I don't want to speak to their intent, but a lot of the legislation just it seems to try to rein in local government.
Seems to be speaking that way. So do they think that we're making too much money, or we have too much money? And
I heard that a lot this year, that local governments are making too much money.
That means the employees are getting paid too much. Is that what they're saying?
No, I don't know, not specifically.
That's where our money goes, to employees.
And that's, to be fair, that's a fair argument, and I would encourage you to ask your representatives that. What do you think we're spending our money on?
I mean,
what do you think is frivolous?
There are things we
that
buy,
we're
supplies,
spending?
and equipment, but
Right.
the big chunk is employee and employee benefits.
Yes, so I would encourage you, if you get in front of your legislators, that you have that conversation on, and if you think that government spending is too high, what do you think we're spending our money on that we should not be? I think that is a fair question.
Kind of a follow-up to their intent a little bit. One of the frustrations I have with the Senate Bill 1, that what's been passed, is, to me, they've just relayed a partial truth to the people. They've told what they've done as far as property tax relief, but they haven't given the full story about what the impact of that is. Now we have lit revisions that are going to cost you. They haven't told the full story. Was any of that discussed during their sessions about, hey, we need to talk about this too? Not just the reductions of property tax. We're increasing your income taxes. Was any of that ever discussed or talked about?
So by way of how they will relay it to the public from a communication standpoint, I think that's a caucus, probably a conversation. But when Senate Enrolled Act 1 or Senate Bill 1 at the time was going through Ways and Means, and this is where we saw the significant changes. You know, it was voted on, it was discussed, and it was voted on. Whether or not the average Hoosier watched and or understood the discussion, I can't speak to, but and whether or not that was appropriately relayed by the news outlets, again, I'm not, you know.
That shows them to be less than forthcoming, I think, is what my concern there. If I was there, I'd be saying, hey, we're doing this for you, but this is gonna cost you in this way instead, kind of thing. You gotta tell the full story, I think.
Yeah.
There's a Dr. Larry DeBoer.
Oh, yes.
He does a great job of talking
Him a
about
lot.
local government financing and so forth. Great article in the Chronicle sometime back talking about the impacts. It wasn't just the property tax reform, it's local income tax reform as well. So
Yes.
that part wasn't really talked about by the people I've heard talk about it at the General Assembly or the governor's office.
Yes. Well, and I think, and I'll give Speaker Houston and Pro Tem Bray some credit in a sense where they did say we want to move to a model of choose your own destiny, right? That's kind of the rhetoric that they said all session. The nuts and bolts of that, again, public perception,
Your own destiny within our bounds, within our limits, you can choose your own destiny.
And so what that meant, what they mean by that though is, yes, you have to pass a tax to.
I just wish
you don't
we would
have
tell,
to, technically you don't have to, but.
when we
you want to
deal,
make
well,
up
we
for it.
have to with the dollar.
If you
If we're
wanna
gonna
make
provide
that-
the same services we're providing,
Exactly,
pay our people
right.
what we're paying, then you have to have
Right.
the dollars to do it.
Right.
So our taxpayers and citizens need to understand that. I know that when we have this discussion, when we make any decisions, we're gonna have to do that, okay? It would've been nice if the people in the General Assembly that made the rules that make us do this had informed the public, this is the impact you're gonna see because of what we did. And they aren't gonna do that, or haven't done that yet.
Never have done that.
No, never have. You think at some point they might be forthcoming and tell that full story, but it's just a partial truth, the part that makes them look good.
Right, yeah, I mean, I'm on the radio after our council meetings once a month, and I basically just flat out called it a tax shift. It wasn't a tax savings, and I feel like some of that business personal property tax, which used to be paid, has now really shifted to the individuals through the WIT. It'll be paid, so it isn't a property tax relief bill in my mind. It's a tax shift bill. Is really the label I feel like it is.
I just think they shouldn't feel proud of themselves of how they communicated what they did, the full impact.
I agree.
Maybe they feel proud about the property tax relief piece, but tell the full story.
Right.
That's what they need to do.
Right, I don't think it was transparent what they've done. Yeah, they were just touting the positive and not the negative, I'll call it, which is what we have to do.
I don't mind doing it if that's what the public wants, but let them tell what they did so that it's not a surprise to people.
Right.
And blame us for any increases that may come. No.
And I'll take that, but if the groundwork had been laid, at least there should be no surprise. Hey, this is why it happened.
Right.
And obviously, if we do that, we'll have to make those comments and state that. And that's just the fact.
Right. I agree. Okay, so that's your presentation.
That is. Thank you
Okay.
for having me.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or anything regarding? And that would be something to definitely think about, ideas for legislation at the state level, which is impacting our county. Probably talk to the commissioners about that as well. Anything that we think we might need to try and get ahead of.
So are the commissioners setting the July meeting date for us to get together?
I
Or
put that
are
as
you
a
going-
tentative month. I mean, we could do early August. I'll email you and we'll kind of figure it out.
Soon it'll be toward the end of July or.
So, I mean, it's up to you. I'm out of town the first week. It's the 4th. I'm sure a lot of you are too. We can
We'll work on
figure
it.
that out. I'll get my calendar to you guys. And we'll-
July would seem to make sense just because we have budget hearings that comes up in August, and at least we could have some early preparations.
Yeah, and so what I think would be great too is I was notified that one of the Republican chambers is going to have a retreat, I think in sometime in August, and that's kind of where they go away for a couple days and hash out what they want to work on next session. So we obviously have Goss Reeves and Karakoff, and so if we need to put something, a bug in their ear, or would like them to bring something up, that would be a good trajectory to kind of get them ready for that and keep that momentum.
You mentioned those, I'll just make a little bit of, I guess, a plug for Senator Zay. I know the Senate only passed this bill 26-22, it's pretty close, but he did have a no vote, so I appreciate the fact he was willing to stand up. Not sure what his logic was in reasoning, but he did vote no to that legislation, so I appreciated that.
That was on Senate Bill 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a hard vote for a lot of them.
Yeah. Or others that are represented did not vote no.
Right, that's correct. That's my understanding. Yeah. Okay. Well, the next item that we had on our agenda was lit discussion, which I think the leader of that is unable to attend this meeting. I didn't know for sure. We had tentatively talked about June 11th. Is he going to be able to attend that?
Well, it's not that he can't attend, it's
Right.
just that he doesn't have the answers that you guys are looking for, and he doesn't expect to have them until the end of next week, possibly the first of the week for our regular scheduled council meeting. So
Okay.
he may possibly be able to attend that meeting.
Okay. Okay.
I might tell you a few things I did some calculations on just so you can hear it.
Yep, appreciate it.
And like I say, there's the missing piece of some of the property tax impact that we'll need to know going forward. Currently, we have local income tax of 2.55%, okay? 1.3% goes to certified shares, which means our general fund gets that money. It's money that we have. And in 2025, Grant County is getting $8 million for that. $8,833,000. And you guys have I think Angie made a copy of this at your table. This shows you the amounts. But $8,833 is what Grant County government gets out of our certified shares, 1.3% tax. Okay, that's 43% of the total that's collected. We also get some money from our economic development tax, which is, if you combine that with our special purpose for the Growth Council, it's 0.25. We have a 0.25 tax in place there. Grant County government gets 1.6 million out of that. Okay, so you combine those two numbers, right now we get $9.6 million from those two taxes, okay, in 2025. The part we also have a 1% tax on for property tax relief. Obviously, our taxpayers get the benefit of that 14 plus million, that's $14.25 million that gets used for reducing property taxes. Mostly homesteads, but everybody gets some. All classes of property get some. Most of it's homesteads, okay? So that's 14.2, but if you look at just the money we get coming into our general fund and our seeded fund, it's 9.6 million. The tax rate, the lit rate that it would take to replace that money is 0.6742. So a 0.7, you have to go to the nearest tenth, I think. 0.7 is the tax rate that it would take in the lit to, under current conditions, collect that money. Okay, so 0.7. Our cap is 1.2, so it leaves about a 0.5 below the max, if you will, of that 1.2. So just a number for you to have in mind there. What I want to do is also see what the impact of the property tax piece is. I just don't know it yet. I know that currently in 2025, our abstract levy, which means the tax bills that went out to our taxpayers, it was just under $20 million for Grant County funds, just under $20 million. We're going to lose 1.9 of that in cap losses, 1.9. So it gives us a net of just over $18 million. But I don't know what the losses would be if we didn't have that property tax relief piece. I'm thinking, based on my conversation with Darren today, maybe another couple million. I don't know that for sure, but instead of 1.9, it may be more like $4 million of losses we would have if it wasn't for that piece. I'm not sure of that one yet. But bottom line is, I think if we have the concerns about going forward, what we're going to be able to do as far as revenue to replace what we're going to lose, or we're going to be able to fund the project, all those kind of things. I'll make this simple comment without getting in depth because of the property tax piece I don't know yet. But it would appear if we make the choice, we'd be able to replace the revenue we're going to lose and fund what we want to do as a project, I think, with the income tax piece. Now, obviously that means it's going to go up. But that's something we probably have the capability of doing if we choose to going forward. We'll have to see how how we feel about that. If we could, and the number that Oscar gave us last meeting, I verified that, his $17,101,000 that number is right on the penny to what I calculated to. That's what we could, with our 1.2% under today's collections, we would collect $17.1 million with a 1.2 rate, which would obviously more than reflects what we're losing and what we need to add to make the payment on a debt for the project we're talking about. So anyway, just wanted to make those comments. I looked at that some today as I was preparing for tonight. And there's still some unanswered questions, but that's a brief summary of it at this point.
And I don't know, this is the other question that you can't answer because you don't know, but so what are they going to do in 2 years though?
Yeah, we don't know.
If they think we're spending frivolously, then all of a sudden you've pushed yourself to the max.
Well, in this too, you were projected to lose over $1 million in 26 and 1.2 million in 27. We can't make those changes to recoup those losses during those 2 years, really, unless the tax council would agree to do something as a whole. We as a county council couldn't do it.
Right.
We can still do that 0.2. We did get an answer to our question we had last time, that 0.2, we can do that on our own.
Right.
For the facility we're talking about, the corrections facility.
Right.
So that's something we could do if we choose to. But we couldn't actually replace that money, that's property tax losses in our current funds. So we'd have to absorb those losses, I think, probably, with our current cash balance. Mm-hmm. We could probably survive that. You hate to lose that, but we probably could survive that if that's an actual number. Mm-hmm. That becomes reality. But we don't know what's going to happen in future legislation. Yeah, we don't know that. And we won't be able to know that until it happens. So that's the bottom line.
I guess I'm always one that's been conservative, so I feel like no matter what you do, you want to leave some cushion so that if you have to do another increase, because maybe that income tax ends up not being or bringing in as much as you thought it would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, the trend would say it should still, but you never know. I mean,
right.
You know, that's not positive.
Yeah.
And I agree. I'm one of those conservative guys. I like a cushion too. I've always had people that have been involved with my budgets. You know, I want a cushion involved when I do that. You know that.
Oh yeah.
But if you look at and I'm just going to throw out the max numbers.
Right.
17.1 right now under current edition is the max under LIT for 1.2. Okay.
Yeah.
And we currently get 9.6, not counting the property tax replacement piece, which is a difference of just under 7.5 million. So you could actually increase LIT by 7.5 million, and then you have to adjust it for what you're losing in property tax piece. So there's probably cushion there, Greg, is what I'm saying, but I don't know that, obviously.
Right.
I mean, you don't know until after the fact, but it looks like there is. Right. But I understand the concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once you do something and they do change it, then what do you do at that point? I don't know.
and that's the thing where I guess on the one hand you're upset that this happened, but at the same time I guess I'd rather that it happen now so that we can kind of look at it and plan for it better, but it also might scare you too.
Yeah, you really can't plan for it because it's 2 years and so 2 year window. In fact, every year, even after 28, they can do things. At any time, they can do things to change it for you.
Right.
Now, obviously, we'd have an opportunity to discuss that concern with the people involved when it's happening. Whether that gets ears that agree with you or not, I don't know. But you have an opportunity to discuss it. But no matter what you're doing, if you're in a situation we're in now where we're trying to debate or decide what to do with the facility issue, you're never going to know until after the fact, and even then it changes or could change.
Right.
So thinking a little bit here, let's just say we choose not to increase to the 1.2. Are there other options besides cutting services that the county can generate extra income?
I don't know what it is.
That's pretty much,
I don't know what it would be.
unless you implement some other kind of tax.
Which I know you can't, as far as I know.
Right. So this is pretty much our only option.
In my thought, at this point, yes.
If we're going to replace what we're going to lose, LIT is pretty much the only option, increasing.
As far as I know, that'd be a yes. I know of nothing else that you could do. Are there small? Can you sell space on your tower? I mean, you're talking small. You're talking small. Nothing significant as far as I know.
And that's just to put us where we are right now.
Right.
Yeah, right now the 0.7 would replace right now, not counting that property tax relief, how that affects our losses. I don't know that number yet. I'm going to guess that's gonna be an additional couple $1 million, so that's gonna be another maybe 0.15, so you may be up to 0.85 at this point, you know, with that in mind. I don't know that yet. If I had to guess, I'd say 0.85 at this point with the property tax piece in there. Not sure of that. Don't hold me to that one yet.
Then
Information.
and trying to figure out what that difference is to the average taxpayer in Grant County is difficult to do.
Well, you can do,
Difficult. You can come close by doing a projection.
well, you can do it on actual numbers. If your income is X number of dollars, you know for sure what it's going to be.
Right.
I mean, if you're making 50,000 as far as taxable income, if you're making 100,000 as taxable, you can do the math and know exactly what that impact is. I don't know what the average income earner makes here that lives in Grant County. I don't have that number,
So
but
can you do like what, 0.85?
Oh, yeah, you can do
with
that.
50,000?
yeah, I've got 50,000 be just times. Talking $425 a year if you're making 50,000.
And what is it now?
Well, the county right now you're paying 2.55%, so it's you're paying $1,275 for the year for county income taxes right now. But you know, keep in mind the city of Marion may have its own too that's going to be on top of that. So it's hard to compare apples to apples on that one for sure. I just know that if we put it on as a county income tax, I can tell you what that would be. You can compare what they're paying now, but what they're paying now goes to the townships, the other cities and towns, the libraries. It doesn't go just to us.
And then the city can do up to 1.2, as I see some
believe, yeah.
city council members back there. And so if you would live within the city limits of Marion, you could actually end up at 2.4 if we were at the max and they were at the max.
Plus, I mean, we could also put a 0.2 on for the other cities and towns. Of course, they wouldn't pay that though.
Right.
Well, the county would, I guess, if we're doing, but the extras we put on, just those cities and town units, I think would pay those.
You're
Yeah.
gonna see a stack in there.
Yeah, depends where your residence is, what you might be subject to as far as that.
Right. Marion and Gas City, both are the two that potentially could see.
And Upland, I think, too. We understand Upland could do
It's at 3,500 or more.
3,500 or more. I heard Upland would be in that threshold, too. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I was told.
It's gotta be close.
So it would be 3 units, that 3 cities and towns in this county can do that. Jonesboro is less than I understand,
Yeah.
but Upland, I think, is above that threshold.
Yeah.
That's what I was told. I haven't actually seen the number, but what I was told. So those 3, my understanding would be they could do whatever the law allows them as far as income tax. And their citizens would pay their city or town rate plus the county rate.
Yeah. With the city council members here, I don't know. Have you guys started discussions on that? Just because I haven't actually watched your meetings or anything.
Google says Upland is there.
Oh, okay, sure.
It's over 3,500. That's what I heard. Yeah, that's what I heard.
So Brian and I rushed back here, we missed her presentation, because we were in Indianapolis in 2 4-hour sessions regarding state Senate Bill 1.
Oh,
So to understand about, the property tax and TIF and all that. And so I have a book, I can leave here, but I can also, when I get the link to the recordings, I can give that
Oh,
to
that'd
you
be
guys so
great.
you can
Yeah.
see that.
sure.
So there is a 1.7% cap that it cannot exceed 1.7. And currently, county services can be 1.2%. Fire protection can be 0.4.
Where'd you get the 1.7? I haven't heard of 1.7 yet. 0.4 I've heard of, 0.2 I've heard of, 1.2. Haven't heard of 1.7.
You can the max can be 1.7 overall. So
Overall for who?
the new tax rate structure,
Okay, but Grant County government, it's 1.2. Plus we could put a 0.4 on for the fire and so forth.
right, and a 0.2 for non-municipal.
Right, the under 3,500. and the-
So
Right.
you add those together, it's 1.8. So somewhere you
Yeah,
have to
something's
get
wrong
rid
there.
of
Okay, so we can't go to the 1.8 you're saying? You're 1.7.
Yes,
I
yeah,
got you. Okay.
let me finish.
Okay.
So, yeah, so somewhere you have to eliminate a point.
Yeah.
Depending on whether it's fire or the non-municipal.
I hadn't heard that part yet. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if there's any other, so one of the things that is coming out of this is that the townships have to request through amendment their tax levy with county council. And then you determine what that is. So that's gonna be a huge change for townships, because we won't get it from the state anymore. That comes from you guys. So those are discussions we're gonna have to start having and determine what we're going to do. I know that there's been quiet discussions about merging some of our townships that are really small and struggling to be able to, be able to combine some of our resources and expenses and make it more profitable and that we can help more people. But those are discussions I'm gonna have to start having. Barnes and Thornburg and Baker Tilly are going to start helping me with the legalities of that and what does that look like to also protect the volunteer fire, because the cumulative funds in our volunteer fire is going to be affected greatly. And so find the page that I have that on. But that's something that, Brian, do you remember what they said about the CUNA fund? Is that, we don't get any lid on that or just something like that?
Yes.
So that's gonna be hurting us as a volunteer fire departments because, well, it's gonna hurt the city because then that either volunteer fire departments actually disperse because we can't fund them under the township budgets, and then the city has a lot more area the cities have a lot more area to be able to cover. So, I mean, that's a huge thing that's coming, and that's really scary, to be honest. It was not a fun day to sit there and listen to all this stuff today.
It's not fun.
No, yeah.
And so I know there's a lot of talk. I know that they're hoping there'll be some other revisions before everything starts hitting us in 2027. The problem is the end of my term ends in 26, but I have to prepare the 27 budget. And so for those that are not going to run again, I hope that they're following all of these, because you have to have, I have to fit into your timeline with my resolutions so that you can look at it and then put it into your budget. So there's a lot of moving pieces that are kind of making it a scary issue.
Trickle down of Senate Bill 1.
Yes. Any questions? I'll try and find my answers.
Yeah. Oh, we appreciate the input.
Is there any compilation out there of what our new duties are going to be because of these acts? Has anybody, have you seen anything?
I haven't heard
I think it's subject to change.
How do we get these bodies together? I mean, we need to get together with these towns, townships,
Well, just like what Ms. King said, I mean, there's a new duty that we have.
right?
And are there others?
Yeah, and then there have been some instances in the past where townships, if they exceeded the growth, if they exceeded a certain percentage of the levies and so forth, they had to come to the council for approval. So that's been in place a little, not like it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be different, but so we've been exposed to that some. We've had a couple, like Franklin Township, we've had to deal with that a couple times here in the past. Hasn't been often, it's been kind of rare, but we've been exposed to it. It'll be expanded, I'm sure. Unless it changes between now and whenever it takes effect, the local income tax piece that Deb mentioned that 0.2 tax that we can be, I guess I'll use the word, it can be requested of us to initiate that tax so that the towns and cities below 3,500 can get some money. I would assume libraries are part of that piece, and townships. I'm assuming those units that are kind of left out of this piece can get a 0.2 share. If you had 0.2 in today's numbers, would equate to about, let's see, 0.2 would be about 2.8 million plus in today's dollars. That would be shared throughout those county units. And obviously this chart, you can do the math, you can see how many dollars they're getting now. They're all listed. You can see how much they're getting now at this point. But yeah, those will be discussions that this body will have that they didn't have in the past.
Right.
You know, are we receptive to that? Do we want to do that? Or, you know, those kind of things. My understanding would be, if we do that, the units, the people who live in those affected units will actually pay that tax somehow. I mean, so it's going to be more complicated as far as, you know, if you're in a township, you get this part, and, you know, a town, you get this. It's just going to be different somehow. And I guess they'll mathematically work it out, but it's going to be.
Will they be required to submit a budget to us and then?
I don't know that part yet. I don't. You mentioned there's some kind of timeline for the budgets to come here, but I don't know for sure about that yet. I don't
It changes the
know
whole timeline stack too.
Well, we'd have to somehow merge that. I mean, we all have the same beginning and start date of our budget process. It's just that some do it a little sooner than others, and you know. But bottom line is, you have the same required ending date. So it's just a matter of making sure those dates coincide somehow.
Is that something Sydney can put together for us, since she's familiar with this, to know what I don't know if the commissioners have any new responsibilities or not, but.
And the DLGF always puts out budget timelines and requirements. So I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume this maybe, but the DLGF should be putting together that budget calendar that says this needs to happen when. If you go to their site now, I'm sure there's a budget timeline that's in effect at this point. I'm not sure if they've taken into account the new laws yet, but they put together timelines where you have to meet certain dates to have something approved. And that would include, I assume, those changes.
My budget timeline is the same as yours.
It is, yeah. Normally it would be. I mean, but you may do your actions a little different than we do, but the bottom line is the timeline is the same. You just have to make sure we do it together if we're combining those.
I'll just have to move mine up
Right.
to be able to fit into yours.
Right.
Jim, are the townships included in that 20 cents?
I think so. My reaction is cities and towns below the 3,500, townships and libraries.
Yes.
That's my
Why wouldn't
understanding.
you then just figure out what the lost revenue is gonna be from each of the entities, and then add that up, and then figure out what you actually need to raise? If it's 2 million, you can figure out what you need to raise
I mean, that,
on the rate.
yeah. I mean, that can be done. I'm not sure right now. I think they have to officially come to us and request it. It's not, we don't initiate that. I think they come to us and request it, and then we act on it.
But I think you would wanna make sure, because I mean, you don't want someone coming in and going, well, you know, we need this, we need that, let's just.
Oh, yeah, well, we'd have to
Get on
do the
the
math and
count.
make sure it fits, and we'd have to make sure that makes sense. But that's, I mean, that's here, we can add these numbers up and see what the amounts are and
Yeah.
do the math. I mean, it's easy to do.
And I would think they would be within that realm anyway.
Yeah. I haven't done that math, but yeah, hopefully they would be. But like I say, the 0.2 would give you $2.8 million to be distributed. But I'm not sure what that number is now based on what they're getting.
Yeah. Maybe you won't need that whole point
You may
two.
not, you may not, yeah, you may not. But you're right, I mean, that'd be a mathematical
Yeah.
problem to do when it gets to that. And I just didn't do that today, you can do that easily.
I don't think it really is that complicated myself.
No, it's not. I mean, you just gotta add it up and do the math, do the calculation. Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
But technically, I don't know the full timeline when they have to come to us and ask and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it won't be until 27, page 28, because
worry about it.
that change doesn't take place as far as that 0.2 until later,
Gotcha.
unless that gets changed.
And I'm the largest entity of the townships, and my budget is $657,000.
And I can tell you right now,
What's our projected loss?
Center Township gets $150,000 of our certified shares money, $150,000. And let's see, I think that's it. Yeah,
Yes, it is.
150,000 is what they get from us. Out of the local income tax money that comes in, out of the 1.3 for certified shares, they get 150,000.
How much you get for property tax?
Yeah, I can't tell you that.
Do you know, Deb?
Well, I can tell you that right here. Hold on a second.
1,200 a month.
I can
I'm
tell you.
shocked if Jim did that.
Center Town is a little less.
We're all coming to the end.
You're told, I know, it's like,
Okay, let me get the right one. Here, here's Center, right on top. Center Township, the abstract levy, I mean, that's what the tax bill should be for people for this year, $480,000. Now, they're projected to lose 56,000 of that in tax cap losses, so a net of 423,000.
Plus the projected,
150 plus 150. That works.
that's still pretty close to the 600, so you don't have to make up too much and let,
Well, the lit piece is 150,000.
no, I know, but under that 20 cents, they're not gonna take
Oh, no, yeah, that, they won't get much of that 20 cents.
at all.
Yeah, not much. Of the lit numbers, of course, townships, that is the biggest one. But, let's see, what the, library, Marion Library, theirs is what? Right here, 642,000 for the Marion Library. That's a big chunk. It's all there on the schedule, you can see.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, we can do the quick math, add them up, is that up to 2.8 million? I don't know offhand, we'd have to do it to see.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. Do the math, you can find out, Dave.
Yeah.
I can sit there and do it, I guess, but, well, I will do that sometime.
I'll bet you haven't.
I haven't done it yet, but I will do it.
Yes.
Well, I guess the next item that we've got on the agenda has to do with special session Wednesday, June 11th. So I guess I'm going to question what our topic is for that.
I don't think we really need to until Dave's ready to give us some, not Dave, Darren's ready to give us some
Yep.
property tax
Okay.
fees. I mean, that'd be my thought.
Yeah.
We'd just be having this discussion again.
We're gonna be here in 2 weeks anyway, right?
Yeah, our regular meeting, yep, we're 2
Now,
weeks
I will
away.
say this, we need to be thinking, if we're gonna do something with the current income tax rate that we have in place, that would involve the full tax, well, it wouldn't have to. If we do the 0.2 for that facilities piece,
Right.
that can be on us.
Right.
But whatever we're gonna do with the income tax rate that's gonna be effective for 26, we ought to be thinking about the timeline when we're gonna do that, because there's a deadline we need to meet.
Right.
So, and I'm not sure if there's still something that the DLGF has to be made aware of prior to end of June,
I do believe they have to be notified that there is a
that we're
change.
contemplating that change or whatever. So it could be when I need to make sure that gets done,
Right.
prepare us to be able to do.
Yeah, well, and that might actually fall to two people that are in the audience related to the commissioners of a project, then where are they at on a project, if they have any numbers or anything. I think Mr. Pulling appreciates that as he smiles at me. Mr. Middlesworth, I can't see his face from here, so.
As far as the jail project update,
Yes.
I mean, obviously, BW presented in your last council meeting, the
Right.
committee hasn't met since, and
Right.
I know that, per some of our conversations about scaling the project back from the 75 million, somewhere back to the 60 million mark. And I think that we're on track to have another jail committee meeting in the near future to discuss that.
Okay.
You know, I think I'd make this comment too. It's important for us to get to some number that we feel good about, obviously,
Right.
whatever that number is. But I do want to make the comment that I really hope that when we get this project, if we do a project, when we do it, I want it to be something that we don't have to worry about revisiting another 2 or 3 years down the road. I want us to get it and have it done for a long time. I mean, I won't be here maybe that much longer, but I don't want it to be for the next council has to, every year they're dealing about, hey, we have to renovate this or do this. Whatever we're gonna do, let's do it. Or if we're not, let's let it go down the road without spending money on it, I guess. But if we're gonna do a project, let's do a project right, I guess is what I hope we can do. So, just my thought.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, and whatever that right is.
Yeah, and I guess my whole thing was with the project they're proposing, I'm kind of choking on even the $60 million.
Well, no one wants 75, I think.
Yeah.
No one wants 75.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, initially when they talked about a pod, my understanding was building a pod was like 30 million or something like that. If I go back to my original drawings and things, and now somehow that's 50 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's more than that probably.
Yeah, which is a significant
Yeah.
increase.
Yeah, there's the addition is 48, no, almost 49 million for,
Right,
that's the pot and some, I think some, maybe cafeteria and some laundry area.
right. So,
That's more like 50.
right, yeah, which
And
is,
renovation, we're not really sure what that's gonna entail, but
That's
That's-
just
that's the
construction
big
cost,
one.
Jim? That's just the construction costs?
that's,
yeah, is that just the hard cost?
Hard
I'm
costs?
gonna say that includes the soft, if it's 50 million. I'm not positive, I'm thinking that probably includes the soft in that piece.
That's what I was thinking.
I think that'd be
Yeah.
right, I think.
That's 440 days.
Pardon me?
That's four.
Yeah, that's the, well, 410 it shows here, it's 344. Shows 410 on this drawing. But we did talk about 440 at one time on something too, I think, so this is showing 410. 440 is one number we did see, so I may have a prior, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure about that one. We've seen 2 or 3 different ones, but
Yeah,
this one shows 410.
yeah,
But we did have something with 440 on it, I think. In
yeah,
fact, this is, because we had that, in the current juvenile detention center, that double bunking of, if we did the double bunking for that for adults, that made it 440, I think, instead of the lesser number, 410 or something less.
yeah, that made it like 90 over there.
96, I think.
45.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah,
Is there a possibility that contractors will get more aggressive over the next couple of years with schools, townships, counties feeling the effect of Senate Bill 1? Maybe the work is gonna be compressed a little bit because of that?
Of course, you heard the presenters last meeting say they really felt like it was going to be a lot less than that when it came down to the actual bids, because they thought, they've got contingency built in. They felt like the contractors that put bids into them as far as projected costs have contingencies in them too. So they would tell you it's going to go down a chunk just on that. But how much, it becomes the issue when it's all said and done. They seem to think we can get down to that 60 million number, I thought, just on their comments after all that's said and
After we
done.
commit money.
But, yeah, it's, well, we don't have to commit it until later. We're committing the planning money, the ARPA monies that we're using for this study and the preparation work. We are committing that if we go forward.
right.
But we haven't committed to actually selling bonds and putting the 60 million or whatever it becomes into the project yet.
I don't know if we have any public comments.
I think the bottom line is from this body that we're just gonna have to decide, what is affordable and work backwards. I mean, obviously, we agree that the pod and the laundry and the kitchen would be a necessity. And I know it's like 48 million like you've discussed, but at the end of the day, this body needs to decide if this is our all in and we can work the project backwards. I mean, obviously, there was 11% contingencies built in. I mean, the longer the project waits down the road, I mean, it will increase 2 to 3%. This is typical. So,
Right.
but
And with that, Shane, I guess I would tell you guys, I think within the lit scope you're given, with the current law, I'm not sure whether it was going to change, but under current law, you can do this. I mean, you've got the income tax dollars to give you the flexibility to do it if you choose to make the rate that. That's what you have to decide is, what am I willing to do when it comes to that lit rate to make it happen? You're going to have to get to the little area you're comfortable with, what that is. But I think you have the choice, just a matter if you want to make a choice or not. That's what it looks like to me anyway.
Can I make if you don't mind, I'd like to just make a comment more as a member of the public than as your attorney.
Sure.
As someone who is very involved in the criminal justice system,
Yes, sir.
it really bothers me that all of you guys have been thrust into a situation where you're asked to spend an enormous amount of money when we had 3 or 4 years ago, 270 people, 280 people in jail. And now all of a sudden we're at 450 or whatever. You guys are asked to pay 1.5 million or whatever you're asked to pay. And now all of a sudden you're talking about a 440 person jail. I'm probably gonna get myself in hot water, but to me, that is rewarding bad behavior, is what I see. And the other thing you've got to factor in is the costs of that jail, the medical costs alone. As you get towards 500, I was told is $2 million alone. So you've got to really be careful about what the operating expenses of a facility that's that large are going to be, because they're going to be high. And you only have so much money that you can spend. So and I've said it many times, that I have no idea how all of a sudden we jumped to 150 people. And I think that is a question, at least if I were in your shoes, and I was in these guys' shoes for several years, I would want to know why. And is that something that's going to continue? And is it something that needs to continue? I am seeing cases that are filed that just, I don't understand. I'll give you a quick example. Today, I had a case, a guy, if you're a sex offender, you're required to have an ID. The guy went in to register, and I saw this because I was judging Gas City today. He left it in his car, his ID in his car. He didn't bring it in. They charged him with failure to have your ID on you. He was in his car. He just didn't bring it in, yet he got charged with that. And I had an initial hearing on that today in Gas City.
Fire alarm.
There's a person that has got to go through the jail, actually in jail, has to deal with bond. There's so many circumstances like that.
Well, who charged you?
Prosecutor's office.
Here?
Our local guy who runs the registry sent the paperwork over to the prosecutor's office, and they filed charges on the guy.
Since you're commenting on that, I would say that I'm also aware of that situation, and that's an untrue statement. That's an unfair statement that you're giving the public. Because that's just simply not true.
I read the paperwork today.
Okay.
That's what it says. Now, if there's
That's simply not true.
If there's more to it than that, then I don't know what it is.
Can you call it Lisa?
Yeah, we probably better, since we got an alarm going.
Hey, Dave.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Thank you. Yeah, I shouldn't